What is compatibilism? This is a philosophical perspective typically promoted by Calvinistic scholars, which claims that free will and divine determinism are considered compatible, so long as you define free will as acting in accordance with your nature or your desires. Compatibilistic Calvinists attempt to maintain that people are free in the sense that they are doing what they desire. However, this appears to be an insufficient explanation to maintain any sense of true freedom, considering that compatibilists also affirm that even the desires and thoughts of men are decreed by God. This is an important circularity in the claims by the Calvinist that humans can be considered genuinely free so long as their actions are in accordance with their desires, i.e., voluntary. Given the long-held Calvinistic belief that all events and actions are decreed by God, then human desire, the very thing that compatibilist claims allow human choices to be considered free, must itself also be decreed. But if so, then there is nothing outside of or beyond God's decree on which human freedom might be based. Put differently, there is no such thing as what the human really wants to do in any given situation considered somehow apart from God's desire in the matter, i.e., God's desire as to what the human agent will desire. In the compatibilist scheme, human desire is wholly derived from and wholly bound to the divine desire. God's decree encompasses everything, even the desire that underlie human choices. This is a critical point because it undercuts the plausibility of the compatibilist argument that desire can be considered the basis for human freedom. Imagine if a man invented a love potion that he gave to a woman that he admired for years, who never had any affection for him. But because of the potion, she fell in love with him. Would anyone consider this true love simply based on the fact that the woman now desired the man? Of course not. When you define freedom in terms of doing what one wants to do, it initially appears plausible only because it subtly invokes a sense of independence or ownership on the part of the human agent for his choices. But once we recognize, as we must within the larger deterministic framework encompassing compatibilism, that those very desires of the agent are equally part of the environment that God causally determines, then the line between environment and agent becomes blurred, if not completely lost. The human agent no longer can be seen as owning his own choices, for the desires determining those choices are in no significant sense independent of God's decree. For this reason, I feel human desire within the compatibilistic framework forms an insufficient basis on which to establish the autonomy of human freedom, and from this, the legitimacy of human culpability for sin. This is very important because it has to do with the blameworthiness of man and the justice of God. How do you feel about a judge who sends a mentally ill criminal to the electric chair for committing a crime that he literally could not have refrained from committing? How do you view that criminal? In this scenario, the judge is painted in a very bad light, and the criminal is seen as a victim of sorts. In contrast, if the criminal is shown to have committed a premeditated crime with malice and full responsibility as a sane person, the judge seems much more just and the criminal far more guilty. For this reason, a good district attorney seeking a guilty conviction would vehemently argue that the defendant was of sound mind and had the capacity to refrain from the criminal behavior for which he stands on trial. So too, the traditionalist or the provisionist like myself stands to make a parallel argument against all unbelievers who end up in hell. The lost unbeliever cannot resort to the defense of, quote, total inability. Those perishing in hell cannot rightly say, quote, I was born hated and rejected by my Maker, unable to willingly choose otherwise, or, quote, the revelation of God, even through the powerful truth of the gospel was insufficient to enable me to willingly respond in faith. No, see, the lost do not have any excuses for their unbelief, according to Scripture. And I cannot think of any better excuse than that provided by the teaching of Calvinists regarding the moral incapacity of man's nature to respond willingly to God Himself. By the way, these arguments are not new arguments. We see them in the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd century from the earliest church fathers fighting against Gnosticism. For instance, Irenaeus wrote, quote, "God therefore has given that which is good, as the apostle tells us in this epistle, and they who work it shall receive glory and honor, because they have done that which is good when they had it in their power not to do it. But those who do it not shall receive the just judgment of God, because they did not work good when they had it in their power so to do. But if some had been made by nature bad, and others good, these latter would not be deserving of praise for being good, for such were they created. Nor would the former be reprehensible, for thus they were made." End quote. There are dozens of more quotes from the earliest church fathers fighting against the deterministic philosophies of the Stoics and the Gnostics of the first few centuries. For more on the earliest church writings on this topic and the influence of Augustine on the doctrine of salvation, please look at Ken Wilson's book called The Foundation of Augustinian Calvinism. You can find it on Amazon for $10. Don't forget to like and share this video on social media. And if you haven't subscribed, click on the logo in the bottom right corner now. Visit us at Soteriology101.com. To support us, click on the support link in the top right corner to help us spread the news of God's love and provision for all people. If you're interested in a higher theological education, click on the Classroom link and learn more about Trinity Seminary.